Temperament. The child's role in infant caregiver interactions is greatly influenced by their personality. For example, mothers often respond differently to happy, friendly babies who like to cuddle compared to fuzzy, irritable babies who squirm while held. For infants, personality does not yet include many components that becomes evident later on, such as beliefs, attitudes, and values. Therefore, the study of infants' personality is generally focused on emotional expressiveness and responsiveness to environmental stimulation. These components of personality are referred to as a temperament. Temperament describes a baby's behavioral style, reflecting not so much what babies do, but how they do it. For example, two babies may both enjoy a ride on a mechanical swing, but one might react wildly, screaming with delight, while the other remains calm and even fall asleep. Most researchers view temperament as one of the many individual differences or traits that makes each child unique. Defining temperament. Definitions of temperament often focus on heritability, stability, and early appearance. While heritability is crucial to some definitions, and twin studies provide some evidence of genetic influence on infant response styles, such as fear responses, not all behaviors thought to demonstrate temperament have a genetic basis. Stability over time is another important feature in definitions of temperament. Findings regarding the stability of temperament have been somewhat mixed and can be explained by both nature and nurture models. Some trait characteristics of temperament are detectable within days of birth, while other temperamental indicators emerge later, and some that are present early on may later disappear. For example, recent research has found correlations between fetal health rate and subsequent maternal rating of infant temperament. The most widely used classification of temperament was developed in the 1950s by two pediatricians, Alexander Thomas and Stella Chess. An important dimension identified by this couple relates to the fit between the baby's response style and the physical and social environment. The degree of goodness of fit determines the influence of infant's temperament on later development. This concept aligns well with the transactional view of early social development and has become a key idea in temperamental research. Thomas and Chess research project, named the New York Longitudinal Study, continued for more than 40 years and represents one of the most significant longitudinal efforts in modern child psychology. The research began as an effort to predict children's psychological adjustment by identifying potential problems early. The strategy was to develop categories of infant temperament and then examine whether these categories related to the child's social and emotional development at later ages. After extensive interviews with parents of infants, Thomas and Chess identified three clusters of characteristics that occurred frequently, leading them to conclude that they had identified three early behavior styles. They labeled these styles easy, difficult, and slow to warm up. The easy baby usually has regular patterns of eating, sleeping, and toileting. They adapt well to changing situations and generally have a positive, happy mood. Easy babies are willing to approach new objects or people, and their reactions are typically of low to moderate intensity. Thomas and Chess found that about 40% of the babies they studied could be classified as this type. The difficult baby is quite the opposite. Their schedules are less predictable. They are uncomfortable when situations change and often cry or display a negative mood. These babies are also withdraw from new experiences and react intensely to most environmental stimulation. This pattern was evident in about 10% of the infants. The slow to warm up baby also adapts poorly to changing situations and tend to withdraw from unfamiliar people or objects. However, they are typically less active and respond at relatively low intensity. About 15% of the babies were classified as this type. The remaining 35% of the infants in the project did not fit into any of these three categories. Robert Plomin has developed a model that suggests infant temperament is strongly biological with inherited traits that appear early and remain influential through life. In his theory, emotional activity, sociability, and shyness are seen as reflective of and influenced by both caregivers and the surrounding environment. Emotionality in this model refers to how quickly a baby becomes aroused and responds negatively to environmental stimulation. For example, a baby high in emotionality might be easily awakened by a sudden noise and cry intensively in reaction. Plomin believes this emotionality in this model refers to how quickly a baby becomes aroused and responds negatively to environmental stimulation. For example, a baby high in emotionality might be easily awakened by sudden noise and cry intensely in reaction. Plomin believes these differences represent inherited variation in infants' nervous system, with some infants have quicker trigger and experiencing greater arousal than others. During the first few months of life, emotionality is shown through general distress reaction such as crying in unpleasant situations. Later in the first year, emotionality begins to evolve into either fear or anger responses depending on the infant's experiences. Activity describes the baby's temper and energy use. Babies high in activity are constantly moving, exploring new places, and frequently seeking out vigorous activities. This trait describes how the baby behaves rather than what the baby likes to do. Researchers use the analogy of a car. The activity level determines how far the infant can go, but the environment determines the direction the infant will take. Sociability refers to an infant's preference for being with other people. Babies high in sociability do not like to spend time alone and often initiate contact and interaction with others. This trait measures how much a child initially prefers stimulation from people rather than things and is more clearly assessed in baby's reaction to unfamiliar people, where the strength of a prior relationship does not come into play. Shyness refers to the child's response to unfamiliar person, both at home and elsewhere. It measures awareness rather than social activity, which is what the sociability scheme measures. Research findings suggest that these domains are stable from the 18 to 50 months. Initial measures are presumed to reflect genetic influences, while later measures reflect interaction with the environment. Rothbard described infant temperament as characterized by two main components: reactivity, responses to stimulation, and self-regulation, control of arousal, both of which are assumed to be innate. Reactivity is similar to Blooming's dimension of emotionality in that it refers to how easily and intensively a baby responds to stimulation. The major difference is that Rothbard also includes positive arousal, such as a baby smiling and laughing at new toy. The other component of temperament in this model is the baby's ability to increase or reduce this reactivity. This ability, termed self-regulation, is assumed to be inborn and varies from child to child. Control of arousal by infant can take many forms, such as how long a baby looks at stimulating object before turning away, or how they approach and explore it. The specific behaviors used for self-regulation change as baby grows older, but the underlying temperament trail presumably determines the infant's success in achieving it. Like the previously described schemas, Rothbard's model is interactionist. Even though babies differ in their reactivity and self-regulation ability from birth, the child's caregivers and physical surroundings play a major role in determining the path the development will take. Temperament and social interactions. Researchers studying the effects of infant temperament on behavior have concluded that social interactions are influenced by both personality and the degree of match between temperament and environmental expectations. Many studies support the goodness of fit concept proposed by Thomas and Chess. For example, if mothers of infants with unstructured and unpredictable behavior try to follow a rigid pattern in their caregiving, both mother and child might feel stress and dissatisfaction. However, if these mothers are themselves less structured, the outcome can be notably different. The quality of children's social interaction can also affect their cognitive development. When mothers view the infants as having a more difficult temperament, they tended to provide fewer learning and discovery opportunities during daily interaction. Importantly, follow-up observation at age 5 reveals that these children did not perform as well on tasks involving cognitive problem solving. Temperament and behavior problems. Babies classified as difficult in the Thomas and Chess study displayed more behavioral problems during childhood than those in other classifications, although few correlations were found in adulthood. Other studies have also found links between being classified as difficult early and behavioral problems later in childhood and adolescence. One possibility is that the aspects of a baby's temperament that lead to being classified as difficult, such as frequent crying and irritability, increase the likelihood that parents will respond in less than optimal ways. This can lead to problems in the child-caregiver relationship and ultimately to behavior problems in the child. This expectation relates to the goodness of fit concept described earlier. A very different explanation is that the positive correlation lies primarily in the eyes of the beholders, meaning the parents. According to this analysis, the fact that some parents rate their babies as difficult and later report them as having behavior problems may result from the parents' attitudes, expectation, or approaches to child rearing rather than from the child characteristics. Shy, timid infants who respond quickly and fearfully in novel situations are described as inhibited, a condition that seems to predict later problems. Kagan's research involved an impressive longitudinal study designed to determine whether certain behaviors and psychological responses of inhibited children display an early onset and remain stable over childhood. Kagan's approach was to first identify groups of 2 years old who were either very inhibited or very uninhibited. He did this by observing how a large group of children reacted in a laboratory setting with unfamiliar people or objects. About 15% of the children responded to the new situation in a very timid manner and were thus selected for study. The 15% who responded in the most outgoing and fearless manner comprised the uninhibited comparison group. The children were studied again at 5.5 years and at 7.5 years of age to see whether the early response styles were still apparent, as we would expect if inhibition is a stable trait. Two types of measures were used. The first one set of behavior measures, including children's performance on a series of problem-solving tasks with an unfamiliar adult, their interaction with unfamiliar peers, and their social behavior in school. On these measures, about 75% of the children who have been identified as inhibited or uninhibited displayed behaviors consistent with their classification even 6 years later. In addition, most of the inhibited children were found to have developed other fears or anxieties, such as fear of the dark or fear of going away to camp. Moreover, those who have been inhibited as children were more likely at 12 to 14 years of age to display characteristics of social anxiety when interacting with a stranger. The physiological data were reasonably consistent with the behavior findings. Children identified at age 2 as being inhibited continued to show evidence of greater physiological arousal in new situations as second graders. This study suggests that some timid children may be displaying a temperamental trait that, as apparent from infancy, remains reasonably stable over the years and has a biological basis.